The gyroscopic core started singing on the 43rd day of the drift cycle, and I knew before I pulled the diagnostic that it was the kind of wrong we couldn't fix ourselves. I am Soth Orvith. I have run platform Keth Nadar for 11 years. I know every vibration the old girl makes, the deep percussion of the ore crushers, the high whine of the separator arrays, the particular groan she gives when the stellar wind catches her dorsal veins at an angle. What I heard on the 43rd day was none of those things. It was a low, sustained harmonic, almost below the range of my sensory plates, coming up through the deck grating and into my feet. The kind of sound that means a rotating mass has lost its reference point and is searching. I pulled the diagnostic. The primary gyroscopic stabilizer was reading 94% deviation from nominal axis. The secondary was compensating, but the compensation curve was already flattening. Within 18 hours, maybe 20, it would reach its own ceiling and stop. After that, Keth Nadar would begin to list in earnest. We were holding 11 degrees already. At 30, the ore slurry in the processing tanks would begin migrating to the low side. At 45, the separator arrays would cavitate. At 60, the platform would be unrecoverable without a full-length tow. I sent the standard consortium relay flag first. That's protocol. You log the fault, you tag the severity tier, you send it up the chain and wait for a maintenance allocation. I had done it 100 times. The reply came back in 4 minutes. All Tier 2 technical allocations for the Keth corridor were committed to the Vithrani Syndicate's new orbital processing ring over Sector 11. Estimated earliest dispatch, 16 days. We did not have 16 days. I stood at the comms console for a long moment with the reply on my screen. Around me the platform hummed and shifted, that low harmonic still threading through everything, patient and wrong. 19 crew. The nearest friendly port was 3 days at standard drive. We had 2 functional skiffs, neither rated for more than 4 passengers in anything but calm transit. The math was not complicated and it was not good. There is a low-band distress frequency that most of us in the outer corridors know about but rarely use. It doesn't route through the consortium relay. It's an old emergency channel, predates the current compact structure by about 40 years, and it broadcasts wide to whatever monitoring infrastructure happens to be listening in your sector. Nobody tells you not to use it. Nobody tells you to use it either. It sits in the comms menu between the standard relay flag and the emergency beacon, and most foremen I know have never touched it. I touched it. I kept the message brief because I did not know who was receiving it or what I was asking them to do. I gave them the platform designation, the fault type, the list angle, the timeline, and the crew count. 19 souls. Gyroscopic stabilization failure. 18 hours. I signed it with my certification number and transmitted. Then I went to find my senior engineer and tell her what I had done. Devet San had been with me on Keth Nadar for 7 years. She is a small woman, even by Vithrani standards, and she has a habit of going very still when she's processing bad information. She went still now, her amber plates catching the overhead light, and she looked at me for a long moment without speaking. "The low band," she said finally. "Yes. That routes to the human monitoring post, Sector 11 Eastern Array." "I know." She was quiet again. Then how long ago? 12 minutes. She nodded once, turned, and went back to the gyroscopic chamber to do what she could. I watched her go. I did not know what I had set in motion. I was not sure the post was even staffed. I told myself that if no answer came in 2 hours, I would begin the evacuation sequence and start loading the skiffs. The answer came in 41 minutes. It wasn't a voice reply. It was a navigation ping, an active transponder signal, already inside our sector, already bearing toward us at a velocity that meant they had not waited to hear back from me before moving. The ping resolved into a vessel identification code, and I read it twice because the first time I thought I had misread it. The vessel was listed as ISC Arendeth, Human Registry, Technical Services Classification. But there was a second transponder signal behind it, and a third. I went back to the console and ran the signatures. The Arendeth was a calibration and systems vessel, exactly what I had asked for, more or less. The second transponder was a transport, heavy frame, registered to something called the Terran Structural Engineering Corps. The third was, I checked the classification code twice, then a third time, a light frigate, armed, holding a position approximately 800 kilometers behind the other two, drives barely warm, just present. I did not understand what I was looking at. I had asked for a calibration technician. I had sent a 4-line distress flag to a monitoring relay, and now there were 3 human vessels in my sector, bearing toward me at speed, and one of them was a warship. I stood at that console for a moment that felt much longer than it was. The harmonic in the deck was still there, patient and low. Keth Nadar listed 11 degrees and held. Then I opened a channel to the Arendeth and introduced myself. The human who answered was a woman named Karanova. She had short gray hair and the particular manner of someone who has been doing a specific thing for a very long time and finds the work itself sufficient. She did not waste words. She asked me 3 questions: current list angle, secondary compensator curve status, and what was physically accessible around the gyroscopic housing. I answered all 3. She nodded, made a small notation I couldn't see, and told me her crew would be aboard in 20 minutes. "There are 3 ships," I said. "Yes," she said. I asked for a calibration technician. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, not unkind, not impatient, simply level. "You flagged 19 souls and an 18-hour window on the low band," she said. "That's what the low band is for. We'll be aboard in 20 minutes. Have your engineer ready to walk us to the housing." She closed the channel. Her crew came aboard in 17 minutes. There were 8 of them, and they moved through Keth Nadar the way a current moves through water, without friction, without hesitation, checking angles and clearances and overhead access points as they walked, already talking in the shorthand of people who have done this before. Devet-san met them at the housing, and within 90 seconds was talking to their lead technician in the precise, abbreviated language of 2 specialists, finding each other's competence level and adjusting accordingly. I watched it happen and did not interrupt. The structural engineering transport docked at our secondary port 20 minutes later. I met their team leader at the airlock, a tall human man named Brath, who shook my hand and then asked me, before anything else, if he could see the hull survey from our last maintenance cycle. I pulled it up on my wrist display and handed it to him. He scrolled through it in silence for about 40 seconds. "You've got delamination starting on frames 19 through 23, he said. "Outer skin, low side panels. Hasn't breached, but it will in another few months of this kind of stress loading." He looked up. "We'll get it while we're here." I had not mentioned the delamination. It was on the survey, logged as a watch item, but it was months from being critical, and I had not included it in my distress flag. It was not why they were here. "You don't need to do that," I said. He handed my display back. "It's there. We're here." He said it the way someone states a basic logical relationship, not generously, not performatively, simply as a fact. Then he went to find his crew and get to work. I walked back to the observation port on the platform's high side and looked out at the frigate. It was holding its position with the effortless precision of a vessel whose crew knew exactly what they were doing. Its running lights were steady. Its drives were cold. It was just there in the dark, 800 kilometers off, and the scale of it, even at that distance, was not small. One of my younger crew came to stand beside me. Her name is Veth Karev, 19 years old, the youngest on the platform. She had been quiet all morning, watching the humans work with the particular stillness of someone trying to understand what she's seeing. "Why is the warship here?" she asked. I thought about it. "In case something went wrong that the calibration crew couldn't handle," I said. "In case we needed to be taken off." She was quiet for a moment. "We didn't ask for it." "No. They brought it anyway. Yes. She watched it for a while longer. Then she went back to her station, and I went back to mine. The calibration work took 4 hours and 12 minutes. I know the exact time because I was watching the diagnostic screen the entire time, tracking the deviation curve as it came down 94%, then 78%, then 61%. A long plateau while Karanova's team made adjustments I couldn't fully follow even when they explained them, then a drop. 44%, 31%, 18%, 9%, 4%. The secondary compensator came back online at full capacity when the primary reading passed through 20%. By the time Karanova walked out of the housing and into the corridor where I was waiting, the gyroscopic core was reading 3% deviation and holding. She'll drift back up to about 6% over the next month, Karanova said, but that's within normal parameters for this housing type at this age. You'll want a full bearing replacement in the next maintenance cycle. I've written the spec into your system log. She paused. The list will self-correct now that the core's re-referenced. You'll be back to level in about 40 minutes. I looked at the numbers on my diagnostic screen. The harmonic in the deck was gone. It had stopped so gradually I hadn't noticed exactly when, and now that I was listening for it, there was only the familiar percussion of the ore crushers and the high whine of the separator arrays. "Thank you," I said. "It came out quieter than I intended." Karanova looked at me for a moment with that same level expression. "Low band flag is there for a reason," she said. "You did the right thing using it." The structural team worked for another 6 hours. They sealed the delaminating panels on frames 19 through 23, replaced 2 load-bearing brackets in the secondary hull that Brath's team had found during the survey that I hadn't known to look for, and ran a full stress analysis on the ore processing deck that came back clean. I didn't ask them to do any of it. They did it because it was there to do. What I didn't find out until later, one of my crew told me, having talked to one of the frigate's junior officers over an open comm channel, was that the frigate crew had not simply held position during all of this. At some point in the 3rd hour, with the calibration work well in hand and no immediate emergency in progress, the frigate's captain had sent 2 of her engineering teams over in a shuttle to assist with the hull work. They had spent 4 hours in the cold exterior of the platform, in their suits, patching seam erosion on the dorsal spine that was years away from being a problem. I had not asked for that either. When I asked Brath about it later as his team was packing out, he just shrugged. "Captain saw the survey. Her team had the suits and the time." He looked at me steadily. "It was there. You were here." The same logic stated again. The same simple relationship. The last human vessel to undock was the Arendeth. Karanova sent me a final systems packet, the bearing spec, the stress analysis, the complete maintenance log of everything her crew and the structural team and the frigate's engineers had touched, and then she came back on the comm for 30 seconds. She told me to flag the low band again if anything changed before our next scheduled maintenance cycle. Then she said goodbye, and the channel closed. I watched the 3 ships resolve back into the dark. First the calibration vessel, then the transport, and finally the frigate, its running lights steady until the distance swallowed them. Keth Nadar was level. The ore crushers were running. The separator arrays were singing their familiar high note. We had been listing 11 degrees, with 18 hours until things became unrecoverable, and I had sent 4 lines into the dark on a channel I had never used before. They had come with a calibration crew, a structural engineering corps, and a warship standing off. And the warship crew had spent their waiting hours on the outside of my hull in the cold, fixing things I hadn't asked about. I sat down at the log console and opened the maintenance record for the 43rd day of the drift cycle. I am not a man given to long entries. My logs are spare, fault code, action taken, result. But I sat there for a while before I started typing because I was trying to find the right way to record what had happened, not the technical details. Those were already in the packet Karanova had sent, I mean the other thing. The thing that had no fault code. In the end, I typed what I knew. Distress flag transmitted low band, 9:12 hours. Response arrived, 3 vessels, 9:53 hours. Gyroscopic stabilization restored, 13:24 hours. Hull delamination sealed, frames 1923. Secondary brackets replaced. Dorsal spine seam erosion patched. Crew of Frigate ISN Vethavar, acting on own assessment. All personnel aboard, platform nominal. Then I added one more line, which I have never added to a maintenance log before, and which I expect I will not add again, because there are very few times in a working life when the precise, accurate thing to say is also the thing that has no useful category in any form. I wrote, they sent more than we asked for, they fixed more than we reported, they left without ceremony. I filed the log. Outside the observation port, Kethnadar held her position in the dark, level and steady, the gyroscopic core humming quietly at 3% deviation, exactly as it should be.